Here's a run through on how to make a contour map in Civil3D. All right, now the first thing you need to do is to create a group of points to make the contour map out of. So you go over here to the tool space and be sure you're in the Prospector tab and right-click Point Groups and create a new point group. All right, and you just give it a name, whatever seems reasonable. Doesn't really matter what you call it. And you can go, now that creates the shell to put the points into. Now you need to tell it what points to put in it. So I'm going to put all the points in it. So I'm going to go to the Include tab, put Include All Points and hit Apply. And it'll do that. Now I'm going to go over to the point list and have a look at these points. Okay, on the point list tab. Notice the elevations of all of them around 400 feet. And I just scroll through to have a look. Now, look at those though. I've got some at 100 feet. These control points were apparently shot in by the surveyors at 100-foot elevation, not up on the ground where I want them to be. So I want to get rid of these points. They don't really fit in there. So that's 67 through 70. So I'm going to go to the Exclude tab and go with numbers matching and go 67 through 70. And I want those out of there because those are going to mess up my contour map. So I'll hit Apply. And then I'll go back over here to the point list. And they're gone. So that's good. So I'll hit OK. All right, so that gets my my point group in there. Now the next thing I want to do is create a surface. So I'll right-click the surface entry here under the Prospector tab and hit Create Surface. And I'll get a dialog box. Now it wants a name, so I'll overwrite this and call it Topo 1. Now, the style is something you want to pick too. Now, you can pick different contour intervals here. This one is set to 2 feet. There's others if you pull this down. So just pick one that'll work for the ground you've got. It turns out that on this one, 2 feet and 10 will work just fine, so I'll go with that, all right? All right, and then I'll just hit OK. Now, all that does is create an empty shell that I can put the information in to build the surface. So I call my surface Topo 1. I can expand that and expand the definition of it. And here's where I'll put the different things in here that'll make the surface. So I'll start by putting in a point group. So I'll right-click that and hit Add. And here are the point groups that I can use. Now Topo 1 is the one that I want to build this surface out of. So I'll pick that and I'll hit Apply. And they'll come in. All right, so there's my contour map. Now, really, this is the most memory-intensive thing you do in this program. It really would have been wise of me to save before I did that, so I probably should have saved the file before doing that. I save often when I'm doing these contour maps, okay, because it does take a lot of memory and it can blow up on you. All right, now there's a basic contour map based on that surface. Now, I do have one little problem in here in that I've got, well, actually I've got a couple. Notice the boundary was drawn by the program. Now there's some information in here that I didn't really survey and I've got contours in there. I'm going to want to clean that up and hold the contours within the boundary of the survey I did. The other thing that's going on is I've got, I believe it's a valley running through here in this area, a low point. And these contours are kind of running over that valley and kind of acting like it's not there, jumping from one high side of the valley to the other in some places. And I don't want that to happen either. So what I want to do in there is put in what's called a break line. All right, so I get on a junk layer. As you can see, I'm on some sort of layer where I'm not going to display eventually what I draw. And the command I'm going to use to put in this break line that will prevent the contours from going over this valley is I'll just use a 3D Polyline. So 3D Poly. And then I'll hit Enter. And it'll want to know the start point. Now I'm going to put in apostrophe PO, which means a point object. Okay, and I'm just going to pick the points to go into this break line. Now that looks a lot like a node object snap, but it's different. It's different in 2 ways. The first thing is that if I pick PO, I can just pick the point descriptor. I don't have to get right on the point as I do with the node object snap. and it'll draw the line from point to point anyway. But more importantly than that, as far as differences go, is the the apostrophe PO designator will put me up at the proper elevation. That'll put this 3D polyline up on those contours, up at the elevation of the ground. The node object snap will put the polyline down at an elevation of 0, which will create some real problems for my contour map. So I want my break lines to be up at the elevation of the contours, so I want to use the apostrophe PO designator for that. That's the way to go. All right, and I'll just keep drawing this line, and I'll run through those breaks. Okay, oops, I just missed one, so it looks like I better undo that. And I'll just escape. All right, I missed one there, so that's just my mistake. So I'll pull that out of there, and I'll just run that again. Okay. So 3D poly, apostrophe PO, and off I go. So I'll just run from point to point for my topo breaks here. There we go. All right, so then I'll hit enter and enter again. All right, now I would save this drawing before I do the next step. So just keep saving this frequently. Just to be careful. All right, and now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to click break lines here under the prospector tab with the expanded surface. I'm going to right click and I'm going to add. Okay, and I'm going to call this topo break 1. Okay, in your lab you might call the break lines ditch and ridge, you know, just to specify which is which. And I'll hit OK, and then I'll pick this break line here. Now what I want you to do here is have a look at what happens when I do that, okay? Watch what's going to happen to those contours when I do this. Okay, especially right up in here, have a look. Okay, and I'm going to hit, I picked it and I'm going to hit enter, and see they'll just align, they'll run parallel to that break line. They're not crossing over now. They know there's a valley in there, and they're keeping out of the valley essentially. They're not crossing over it. Okay, so that's the function of a break line. Now a boundary is quite similar. Okay, so it just restricts the contours to stay within an outer boundary that you draw. You use a 3D poly also for that. Whoops, my bad. I should have just typed 3D poly. There we go. All right, and then apostrophe PO. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick the points here, but I can be a little sloppy on this. As long as I don't exclude points from my contour map, that'll be fine. So I can skip over 77 there and go right to 78. See, 77 is going to be within the boundary. Similarly, it looks like if I pick this point, I'll include that one there. If in doubt, pick them. I mean, you can put as many as you want in here. There's no harm in it. But, you know, if you don't want to be picking every little point, you can get a little bit sloppy with how you pick. As long as you include points within your boundary, it's fine. All right. Okay, now we're going to head on up this way. See, we're going to exclude some of that data, from some of the contours from the surface, because they don't really belong there. I don't really know what's in here, so I don't want contours running across that. Okay. Didn't look like it liked the close option on that, so I'll go back to that original point manually, and then I'll hit enter there. Okay, so now, once again, I'd save because this takes a lot of memory. And I'll right-click boundary this time, okay? And I'll add, and I'll let that computer catch up a little bit here. Okay, so we'll add, and I'll call this topo1 bound. Okay, and then I'll pick that boundary and see it takes that information out of there, okay? All right, so now I've got that contour map built. Now, a couple of things here. One thing is when I plot, I don't want those break lines showing, so I'll probably freeze out the junk layer when the time comes and get that out of there. Now I'm also left with this other green boundary. Now what that is, that's generated by the program, and again, I don't want that on my map. That's under C10 BNDY. TIN means a triangular irregular network, which is the surface that's built to generate these contours. BNDY means boundary. Okay, so I can freeze that. Now notice the colors match too. So if you're ever looking to freeze layers on this program, look for the color of it too. That's a good clue that you're picking the proper one. So I'll freeze that and that'll go off too. All right, now the last thing to do here is to label, and that's under the annotate command. So I'll pick the top part, annotate tab, the top part of the label. And this is a surface feature. So I pick that first. The label type will be a contour single, and then here are the different types of label styles. Now I'm going to pick 8 fonts, which is what the 08 means. Okay, let's see, I'll get those on major instead of minor. And then I'll just hit add, and then manually I can pick where I want these to go, and it'll put labels in here, okay? So those will be labeled for elevation. And it's just a matter of picking where you want the label to go, and it'll be put in. All right, now you can go in and move those labels if you'd like. To move them, you just grip edit them, grab the middle grip and slide them, and they'll go to new locations if you like. Okay, so you can grip edit them. All right, so that's just a little run through on contour maps.